Good evening and welcome to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's virtual public workshop on potential rules to update and improve the Marine Special Activity License Program. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us and provide input on this topic. Access to this meeting is provided through Microsoft Teams. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. My name is Erica Burgess, and I will be facilitating this evening's workshop. I'm a section leader with FWC's Division of Marine Fisheries Management. Several other FWC staff are joining me today, including Kyle Miller, Taylor Davis, and Lisa Gregg from the Division of Marine Fisheries Management. Your participation is important, and we look forward to a productive meeting and hearing your input. We're so glad that you're here. The purpose of tonight's workshop is to gather feedback on Phase 3 of potential changes to Florida's Marine Special Activity License, or SAL, program. FWC staff are currently in the process of developing recommendations for proposed rules, which we'll present to the FWC commissioners at their February 2026 meeting. Your input is an important part of the rulemaking process. Public feedback gathered during this workshop will help inform those rule recommendations and the commissioners' decisions. Today, we'll focus on topics related to the Florida Marine Science Educators Association, or FMSEA, certification, tagging of marine organisms, and non-conforming gear SALs. Here's the format for tonight's workshop. We'll start with a presentation providing an overview of the Marine SAL program, the need for rule changes, and potential rule changes that are currently under consideration. After the presentation, we'll have a time for questions. We'll accept questions to clarify anything in the presentation about the SAL program and potential rule changes. We may limit the amount of time allotted for questions to provide more time for public comment, which we'll take after questions. We appreciate any feedback specific to the potential rule changes for SALs, but we'll accept comments on anything related to the Marine SAL program. When providing your comment, please direct comments to staff only. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, I strongly suggest you use a PC or your smartphone. Mac computers are known to have issues with the microphone not unmuting in Microsoft Teams. Also, each workshop participant should be logged on in a separate device so that we can recognize individual participants. Once everyone has had the opportunity to comment, I'll review FWC's next steps regarding this round of potential changes to the SAL program. Our workshop will end at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at the latest. Speaking today is not your only opportunity to comment on this topic. If you prefer not to speak on the webinar, you can submit your comment online through our website at myfwc.com/saltwater comments or by emailing marine@myfwc.com. Both of those links are on this slide. I'll reshare them again at the end of this workshop. You can also speak at an upcoming FWC meeting on this topic. At this point, I'll hand off the presentation to Kyle Miller. Kyle's a biologist in FWC's Division of Marine Fisheries Management based in Tallahassee.
Thanks, Erica. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'll get started with some background information about the Marine SAL program. The Marine SAL program provides avenues to allow eligible parties to do important work that would not be possible under state marine fisheries regulations. Some activities that may require an SAL include scientific research, oyster restoration, and the collection of some marine organisms for exhibition. Other activities are only possible through the SAL program, including the operation of coral nurseries for coral recovery and restoration, activities in support of education, and the harvest of broodstock for aquaculture. To ensure Florida's living marine resources are not negatively impacted by activities authorized by a Marine SAL, the FWC restricts applicants' eligibility, thoroughly reviews each application, and establishes license conditions. This ensures that activities are conducted appropriately to minimize risk and evaluate potential impacts. Because SALs provide exceptions to state marine fisheries regulations and because they may allow the collection of prohibited or listed species, as well as the use of harvesting gear that's not otherwise allowed, it's essential that FWC has some oversight and regulation of these activities. FWC issues 10 different types of marine SALs to accommodate a wide range of activities, including scientific research, education, exhibition, the release of marine organisms, the collection of broodstock for aquaculture, testing of innovative fishing gear, the use of non-conforming gear, and certain commercial fishing activities. The complete list of SAL types is listed here on this slide. SAL program staff review applications and issue approximately 400 SALs each year. The SAL program began in 1981 under the former Florida Department of Natural Resources and is now administered by FWC. Marine SAL program rules were last updated in 2009. Based on changes in practices and advancements over the last 15 years, there was a need to update Marine SAL program rules to accommodate evolving needs, update and streamline rule language, update application forms, and to revisit marine prohibited species applicability and requirements. FWC staff are presenting proposed changes to the Marine SAL program to FWC commissioners in 3 separate phases. The Commission approved Phase 1 changes in December 2024, which accommodated new activities, streamlined processes, extended several license periods, and repealed the dredge SAL. These changes became effective earlier this year. Phase 2 changes were approved by the Commission in November of 2025, which established general license conditions and restrictions for all marine SAL types, addressed the transfer of marine organisms, updated application forms and eligibility requirements for education and exhibition SALs, modified rules for the stock collection and release, snook, and marine chemical SALs, and updated the general genetic risk assessment flowchart for stock collection and release to provide more transparency to applicants. We are currently in the process of developing recommendations for Phase 3. We plan to present our recommendations for Phase 3 proposed rule changes to FWC commissioners at the February 2026 FWC Commission meeting. We've developed a suite of potential changes to be included in the 3rd phase of this project, including topics such as the issuance of marine SALs for the collection of marine prohibited species, updates to the Florida Marine Science Educators Association, or FMSEA, certification process, tagging of marine organisms, reorganizing non-conforming gear SAL rules into separate rules for each license type, and updates to the education exhibition, aquaculture broodstock collection, gear innovation, governmental purpose, and nonprofit corporation SALs. During tonight's workshop, we'll focus on the last 3 bullets shown on the slide. Potential changes related to the issuance of marine SALs for the collection of marine prohibited species were discussed at a previous workshop on December 18th. A recording of this workshop is available on our YouTube channel, FWC Saltwater Fishing, and it is also linked on the Saltwater Workshops website. While we'll not be discussing these potential changes this evening, feedback on this topic is welcomed. The Florida Marine Science Educators Association certification provides a streamlined mechanism to accommodate members of the educational community with smaller collecting needs. A FMSEA certification provides exemptions to certain state marine and freshwater resource regulations and allows the collection and possession of aquatic organisms for educational purposes. Before a FMSEA certification is issued, an applicant must pay for, attend, and complete a training workshop conducted by a non-FMSEA entity. Currently, an educator is only eligible for the certification if they complete a workshop that is conducted by the Florida Marine Educators Association. To be eligible, an applicant must be an instructor employed or sponsored by an elementary school, secondary school, home education program, or an organization that provides courses on biological or aquatic studies. Once issued, a FMSEA certification is valid for 3 years and cannot be transferred to another instructor. We suggest revising the framework for this authorization to expand opportunities for additional educational organizations to enter into agreements with FWC to provide training workshops to educators. This could expand the capacity to train educators on best practices for collecting marine and freshwater organisms for education by allowing the potential for more than one training organization. The FMSEA certification provides general authorizations to collect and possess small numbers of non-prohibited aquatic organisms and was intended to support educational sampling trips and to allow for opportunistic collections. Although this provides flexibility for educators to retain organisms, this authorization does not include the same level of oversight, review, and reporting as other requests for SALs to collect and retain marine organisms. This would include information such as educational benefits of requested collections, current species inventory, and details about aquaria where species will be housed and maintained. To ensure better oversight of these collections, we suggest revising the FMSEA certification to only allow the temporary possession of non-prohibited aquatic organisms. Applicants who need to permanently retain marine organisms for educational purposes will be directed instead to apply for the Education Exhibition SAL, which can be more tailored to a specific need or request. To accommodate educators who change employment after completing a training workshop and receiving a FMSEA certification, we suggest allowing these educators to reapply without taking the training workshop if they've completed the required training within the last 3 years. Additionally, to reflect the possibility of having more than one approved training organization, we suggest renaming the FMSEA certification to the Aquatic Species Collecting Certificate. In Florida, an SAL is required to tag and release a marine organism. Only fishing tournament directors are exempt from this requirement to obtain an SAL. However, they may only tag up to 5 fish per tournament for the purpose of awarding prizes to tournament participants. To reduce administrative burden, we're considering adding an additional exemption that would allow state and federal natural resource agencies to tag marine organisms without an SAL. We're also considering expanding the exemption for fishing tournaments to allow tournament directors to tag up to 5 fish per county when a tournament occurs in more than one county. These regulations related to tagging marine organisms are currently located in the General Conditions and Restrictions Rule that's within the SAL Rule chapter. To provide more transparency to the public, we recommend moving these regulations to a new rule, 68B2, within the General Marine Fisheries Rule chapter to make these regulations easier for the public to locate. Non-conforming gear is fishing gear that's prohibited or is otherwise not allowed for the recreational or commercial harvest of marine organisms in Florida. Examples of non-conforming gear include things like nets, oversized or specialized straps, bottom grabs, dredges, long lines, etc. Non-conforming net gear, which are oversized seines or gill entangling nets, may only be authorized for scientific research or governmental purpose pursuant to a scientific research, stock collection release, or governmental purpose SAL. Other non-conforming gear may be authorized pursuant to the Gear Innovation or nonprofit corporation SALs. Currently, all of the SALs that are specific to the use of non-conforming gear, which includes the Gear Innovation, governmental purpose, and nonprofit corporation SALs, are housed within the same rule. To make the regulations for these SALs easier for applicants to locate, we're proposing to move regulations for these 3 licenses into separate rules to make them easier to find and to be consistent with the organization used throughout the rest of the SAL rule chapter. The Gear Innovation SAL allows the use, monitoring, and testing of harvesting gear that's not historically or traditionally been used within Florida. The results of testing gear with the Gear Innovation SAL can be used to evaluate the impacts and efficiency of a proposed gear type and to determine if the gear could be responsibly introduced for general use. This license is issued to commercial harvesters or scientific researchers, but commercial harvesters must have all required commercial licenses and documented landings of the species they intend to target with the innovative gear. The requirement that the harvester must have prior landings for the targeted species is too specific and limits the ability to test gear that may be effective in emerging fisheries like lionfish, like testing innovative methods to harvest non-native species like lionfish. Thus, the proposed rules would remove the requirement for a commercial harvester to demonstrate prior landings when requesting to use innovative gear to target non-native species. The Governmental Purpose SAL is issued to federal, state, and local governments to allow them to use non-conforming gear to meet the needs of public health, safety, or welfare. To better address emergency response needs, such as the need to quickly remove dead marine organisms from beaches and coastal areas after a fish kill, The proposed rules would allow the collection and possession of dead prohibited species and clarify that the Commission may provide additional conditions or exemptions so that a broader group of people could be authorized to perform the activities allowed by the Governmental Purpose SAL for emergency response purposes. The Nonprofit Corporation SAL enables a nonprofit to operate as a biological supply organization and allows the nonprofit to use non-conforming gear to harvest marine organisms and to sell them to research, education, and exhibition facilities to financially support the nonprofit's research, education, or exhibition programs. For this license, we would like to clean up the rule language to clarify that to be eligible for the license, the nonprofit corporation must be designated as a 501c3 nonprofit pursuant to federal law and must have a current letter of tax exemption. This is already required for an organization to meet the definition of nonprofit corporation as currently used in the SAL rules. We are simply moving this language from the definition in 68002 Florida Administrative Code to the eligibility section of the new nonprofit corporation SAL rule to ensure that this is clear to applicants. In addition, we suggest establishing general license conditions for this license type that can be tailored to specific activities authorized on each license. This would include conditions related to the sale of marine organisms, allowable or prohibited harvesting areas, harvesting gears, authorized personnel, and authorized activities. We'd also like to revise the reporting requirements for this license, because an applicant must also have all applicable commercial fishing licenses, commercial endorsements, and wholesale and retail seafood dealer licenses to commercially harvest and sell saltwater products. We recommend that the nonprofit corporation be required to report all organisms that are harvested and sold under their nonprofit corporation SAL through the Marine Fisheries Trip Ticket Program, which is where we record all commercial landings. That concludes the informational portion of the workshop, and I'll hand it back over to Erica now to lead us through questions.
Thank you very much, Kyle. As Kyle said, we'll now take questions on the presentation and the topic of Marine SAL program updates. Out of respect for all participants and to maintain an orderly meeting, I'll limit this time to questions only. The opportunity to provide comments will come in the next segment of this workshop. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function in Microsoft Teams. When I call on you, please unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon. After asking your question, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon a second time. I'll then direct your question to the appropriate FWC staff in attendance. Please be respectful of all speakers. Not everyone shares the same perspective, but everyone has the right to speak their opinion. Personal attacks of any kind are unacceptable. This time, again, is reserved for questions only, and we want to make sure we have plenty of time for public comment. Because of this, I may limit the amount of time allowed for questions to give the maximum amount of time to comments. I'll call in each person in the order in which their hand was raised, and we'll start the question with Allison DeLashmit.
Good evening. I work with the Key West and Lower Keys Fishing Guides Association in the Florida Keys. And my question is around tagging SALs currently. And we work with several scientific institutions and entities that have included many of our captains on their SALs for tagging projects. I am wondering how long, if there's a way to estimate it, how long does it take to add additional people onto a current SAL to tag? Because we have lots of captains that are tagging, and often it's dependent on who's available. And so I'm wondering how long it takes to add people onto a current SAL for tagging. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate your question. I'm going to ask Taylor to provide a response.
Allison, thanks for your question. Yeah, so to amend an SAL, it doesn't take that long. It should take early around just a couple weeks or so, or even less. We typically will just have people who want to amend their SAL to send in an email with the names of the people they want to add and the birthdays of those personnel, and then we'll get them added. But when we add SALs to the queue, it just kind of depends what's in our queue, but it anywhere from a couple days up to 30 days, but it shouldn't be longer than that.
Thank you, Taylor. Our next question comes from Savannah Finley.
Hi. So my question is about the FMC certification. If I'm understanding correctly, the like possession of organisms would be changed from like being able to keep for certain days or keep permanently to is it just being able to go out into the water and not take anything back, or is it only temporary possession?
Thank you for the question, Savannah. Kyle, would you like to start? And then maybe Taylor can also help respond.
Sure. The intent of temporary possession is to collect an animal, and while you're in the field, you can display it to students, and then releasing the animal right there the same day.
Thanks, Kyle. Taylor, do you have anything to add? All right. Are there any other questions? Savannah.
So my follow-up question is, I know that you mentioned having a different like education exhibition application. What would that entail? And is that going to be for the same people who can get the FMC certification?
Savannah, thanks for that question. I'm going to see if Taylor is able to answer. She was just having some problems with her microphone.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if you wanted to be able to collect permanently, you would just need an education SAL, which is an SAL that we currently have. So you would be able to maintain your FMSE certification for temporary possession, but if at any point you did need to permanently collect, you would then just need to apply for an SAL. And going back to Allison's question, that would also take around 30 days to get it back to you after the application was sent in.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Taylor.
I can add to that a little bit too. So the reason that we have that is because for the education exhibition SAL, if you want to retain anything, you also need to provide information on what aquaria you have, what if you already have any specimens of that particular species. So it gives us a little bit more room to review a request and determine whether the facilities are appropriate for that species that you're requesting, and whether the collection is appropriate for the activity.
Thank you, Kyle. If anyone else has a question, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you to ask it. Mike Sipos, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Mike, you should.
Yep,
I see you're
I see
unmuted now.
now.
Yep.
Yeah, so under the new FMC regulation change, it would just be same sort of framework as of now, but just the temporary holding of the organisms. The informal educators, such as extension agents or natural resource staff at like natural estuary and research reserves, are still qualified to receive that certificate.
Great question, Mike. I'll let Taylor respond.
Yes, absolutely. So formal educators and informal educators will still be allowed to receive FMSE certifications, but like you said, it is just changing to the temporary possession only.
I'll do one last call for questions. If I don't see any hands, we'll move on to comments. Savannah, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sorry, I have continual follow-up questions. So if for this education exhibition application, it was mentioned that FWC would be helping determine like if it's okay to keep certain species, but if this is the thing, like we go out with kids and collect and then come back and decide kind of like what to keep, is this something that like, what's the process for that going to be if like you're going out regularly and catching things and deciding whether or not to like bring stuff back to the aquarium? Is this something that you have to ask every time, or is there going to be like a list after you get your application on whether or not you can keep certain species?
So a clarification on your question, Savannah. Are you asking what is the process for someone with an education and exhibition SAL on getting approval for keeping organisms?
Yes. If you go
Okay.
out, like, if you go out multiple times. So if you're going out regularly, not just once, what is the process behind that?
Okay. So, Taylor, could you describe, or it might be Kyle to help as well, to describe under what's being considered for FMSEA, what a FMSEA certificate holder would be allowed to do, and then how the process works for someone who applies for an education and exhibition SAL to gain authorization to retain organisms.
So I think you're asking about opportunistic collections and being able to take something when you find it. Because we are wanting to have a little more oversight over what is retained in aquaria and make sure that things are appropriate, that's probably something that would be best to be planned ahead. And I know that you can find something that's really cool when you're out there that you're not expecting. But the intent here is to ensure that these permanent collections are done in a way that is beneficial to the educators, to the students, and as well as to ensure that you have appropriate facilities.
Thank you, Kyle. And Taylor, can you explain the application process for an education and exhibition SAL and what that SAL license authorizes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to kind of add on to what Kyle said earlier. So when we have SAL applications, we are making sure that, we're offering applicants to possess species that are more appropriate for the aquarium and education that they're offering. And so, kind of going off of the opportunistic collections, if there were an opportunity where you knew about some species that you wanted to collect, we could also authorize an approved collection list. So that would essentially entail, these are all the species that we would like to house. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to house all of them, but that's kind of the way that we handle opportunistic collections now. So if you were wanting to have permanent collection of a few certain species, we could add that onto your SAL and have that be valid for the 3 years that the SAL is valid for.
Okay, thank you. And would permanent collection also be like the old the old the old certification allowed for like for certain species it was like you could keep it for 30 days or you could keep it for like specific periods of time? Would that count as the permanent, or like would that count as that, or would that count as part of the regular certification?
So that would fall under the temporary collection because you're not permanently holding it forever, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you for this question, Savannah, excuse me. The next question comes from Cypress Redlow. Cypress, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, this is more of a comment. I would
Okay,
just like, if
then
that's okay.
Cypress, we have a few more people with questions. If you wouldn't mind, we'll get through questions. Go ahead and leave your hand up, and you'll be the first person who gets the opportunity to give a comment.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Great, thank you. So next up with a question is Terry Williamson.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So more on the side of the government license. So typically Brevard County has done those for huge fish kills. So my understanding is I think the application process will be just a little more tailored specifically for that application versus some of the other applications. Is that my understanding correct?
Thanks for that question, Terry. Kyle, would you mind responding?
The application process for the governmental purpose will not change. There currently is not an application form, it's a written request. And the only change that we're proposing now for the governmental purpose other than is to allow collection of dead prohibited species for emergency response like fish kill cleanups, and then listing out in general areas of conditions that we can add to the license and potentially waive things like background check requirements on authorized personnel to facilitate a quicker response. But the application process is not going to change.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks for your question, Terry. We'll go back to Mike Sipos for his question.
Hi. Yes, this is back at the FMSEA certificate or SAL. I just wanted a little bit of clarification on that temporary hold because it was mentioned, I think, 24 hours at one time and then that 30 days or less. There's some conditions where, we might actually capture marine organisms a day before for an activity in a classroom the next day. Will that be allowed, or is it within that 30-day or 24-hour period?
Thanks for the question, Mike. Lisa, would you like to speak to the release policy and how this would interplay with that?
Sure. Well, the release policy would come into play for the special activity license, and not for the FMSEA certification. So if you are going to, since FMSEA is going to be basically, catch and release, then that means that the special activity license, the education exhibition special activity license will fall under any collections and things that you maintain in holding would fall under our release policy. And that does provide for maintaining species that you have collected for, up to 30 days. So yeah, the special activity license would be the appropriate route to go if you are going to collect animals, 24 hours in advance and hold them for a day or 2 or 3 and then release them. And in that situation, the release policy would come into play, and the standards in the policy just basically are that you can't treat them with antibiotics and treatment chemicals and things like that, and that you have to maintain them in a tank with other animals that are native, that can't be non-natives, from the same coast, from the same area that you have collected, the newer animals from. So there are some standards that are focused on genetics and health, but it does provide for holding things in captivity for up to 30 days.
So if it's within 30 days, we don't need the exhibitor's license. I guess the FMSEA SAL would be sufficient for, let's say holding them within 24 hours, 48 hours.
No, the FMSEA certificate is just for, those same day activities where you're catching and releasing. So if you're going to do anything beyond that, that will be that would be directed to, then you would need to get the education SAL.
So thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Mike. So Mike, if you have comments that you'd like to provide about the time period for temporary possession and a FMSEA or aquatic species collection certificate, we'd love to hear your comments on that when we get to that point. Next with a question is Allison DeLaschmidt.
Hi, a clarifying question on something I just heard from Taylor, I think a couple of minutes ago, and it's regarding emergency response. Again, I work with the Fishing Guides Association in the Florida Keys, and we worked closely with FWRI during a recent event in collection of some prohibited or attempting collection of prohibitive species. That during an emergency response effort, the problem was that we weren't sure who was going to come upon within our organization one of these species at that time. And so we needed all of our captains, which is about 80 of them, to be on something. And so what we did was we worked with our local FWRI team in getting a letter that allowed us to be in possession of those species. Is that still the appropriate way that we need to do it? Because we couldn't get an SAL for, 80 people at that point in time. Is that still the appropriate method to go about that if we were in that event again?
Allison, thanks for the question. I'm going to turn to Kyle for the response.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. If you are doing work for the commission or on behalf of the commission, which FWRI would be a part of that, then what you described is that written agreement between the agency and your organization. FWC can enter into a written agreement with a person or organization to do work for the commission. So that's how you're able to do that, and that process won't change. It will still be available.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Allison. Next with the question is Ben Daughtry.
Hi, I've got kind of two questions. One is, historically, how many FMC SALs are typically out there?
Thanks, Ben. And just to clarify, the FMSEA is a certificate. Even though it's part of the SAL program, it's not an SAL in itself. And I'll turn to Taylor for the response.
Hey, Ben, thanks for your question. So FMSEA certifications are good for 3 years, and each year we issue about roughly 300 FMSEA certifications per year.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just to follow up with what Lisa was saying about a lot of these potential FMCs situations requiring an exhibition SAL, if you're going to maintain that animal at all. So I would assume that there's going to be clarification of language or something in there that basically says that it either stays on the vessel or at the collection point near the shore. So if you were to catch something the same day, transport it an hour inland or 30 minutes inland or whatever, and then transport it back, would that then require the exhibition SAL as well? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Ben, and I'll jump in with a response here. I think the rule language would be clarified so that the FMSEA certificate holders, or what would be the aquatic species collection certificate holders, would understand very clearly what temporary possession means and how and when and where they could possess. So kind of a comment, kind of a question. I appreciate that input. Next person up with the question is Stephen Rhodes.
Hello. I was wondering if I understood correctly that gill nets would be allowed for the non-conforming gear for researchers and government activities. And if so, what are some ways that can help mitigate protected species being caught in these nets?
Stefan, thanks for your question. I'm going to go to Kyle for the response.
Thank you for your question. Gill and entangling nets can be used, can be authorized under scientific research, stock collection and release, or governmental purpose SALs for research purposes. And in that case, just like mentioned with the education exhibition SAL application review process, the requests for those types of gear is reviewed for each request to determine if the gear type is appropriate and how they will be using it to ensure that they don't have bycatch in the nets.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. I'll do one more call for questions. All right, I'm not seeing any more hands, so we'll move now to the public comment session of the workshop. We would appreciate your input on the potential SAL program changes presented this evening and any other suggestions for the SAL program that you might have. As we did with questions, please use the raise hand function in Microsoft Teams to indicate that you'd like to speak. I'll call on people in the order that they raise their hands. When your name is called, click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself and provide public comment. Once finished, please click on the microphone icon again to mute yourself. To allow the greatest number of comments, we'll ask you to keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. If we have a large number of people who raise their hands to provide comment, we may need to further limit the amount of time allowed per person to ensure more people have the opportunity to speak. We'll recognize each speaker once for comment. If you're with a group of people, then each person would need to provide comment. Each person who would like to provide comment will need to join the meeting from a separate device. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and affiliation for the record. You'll see a timing light on the screen. It will start as green and switch to yellow when you have 1 minute remaining, and then we'll switch to red when your allotted time is up. If you have microphone issues or your computer does not have a microphone, please email your comment to marine@myfwc.com. Also, again, if you're on an Apple computer, we recommend you switch to a smartphone to join the meeting. This has resolved microphone issues in the past. This meeting will end at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll allow as many speakers as possible to provide comments until then. With that, let's go to our first speaker, and I asked one person to wait a while back until the comment session, so I'm going to give them the opportunity to go first. Cypress Rudlow, would you like to offer comment? Cypress, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Cypress Rudlow. I'm with Gulf Specimen Marine Lab. We are education facility, marine education facility. And with the education exhibition, SAL has been a hugely important thing for not just my organization, but other aquariums throughout the United States. And these aquariums are the ambassadors for people to learn and experience marine life that don't have the chance to come down to the ocean and see it. And I would hate to think that maybe some situation they got saw out of content by somebody who didn't understand what would happen or what was going on and it went viral would do something by the rule makers to damage that permit. That permit that allows aquariums to come down and get these animals also allows these aquariums to teach about these animals and to teach people how important they are. And even the other organizations that help support the aquariums doing this are helping to spread this knowledge of why we need to protect these animals. And I just think that this permit is incredibly important. and that we, right now might be not the best case with all the heat that has come down, but I think that y'all should really respect the fact that these permits really help the aquariums, and these aquariums are really helping the sea life and educating people why we should protect them. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Cypress. We appreciate your comments. The next person for comments is Chelsea.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Chelsea. I am the current president of FMSEA, and I just want to thank everyone with FWC for working closely with our organization on some of these potential changes. I think we all share the same vision for making sure that educators are still able to reach students with hands-on learning opportunities, both formal and informal, as well as making sure that the safety of the animals is taken into account. One thing I wanted to mention with the temporary possession, I think we had discussed at one point that maintaining the 30-day temporary hold was something that we were discussing. So I would like to still see that taken into account. Some organizations may release on site the same day, whereas others may need it for like the following day, like was previously mentioned. But we do understand that anything that would be permanently held should fall under the education exhibition SAL. So thank you.
Chelsea, thank you for your comments. We appreciate you being here tonight. Next up is Stephen Alcina.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I wanted to say thank you to y'all staffers. I appreciate all the work that you guys do. My comments are about what y'all discussed back on December 18th about the exhibition permits and licenses that are given to some aquariums and other organizations that might fish our, protected species up out of the water. I wanted to express my support for reshaping the licensing process. I saw from last meeting that there's some consideration about setting like a geographic limit of what aquariums and organizations can fish them up out of the water, or an annual limit, something to stop them from, harming our, saltwater ecosystems even further. I don't think anybody was too happy to watch SeaWorld pull a manta ray out of the water and ship it off to the desert. So, I would like you guys to, y'all are the professionals. So I trust you to make the right judgment call on what needs to change to help protect our animals. But something needs to change. So I'd love to see y'all work on that. Thank you again so much for the work you do. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your night.
Thank you for your comments, Stephen. Next up is Ben Daughtry.
Hi there. I just want to say that I can tell that the FMC certificate is a very valuable, important part of educating individuals in the state, and I can also understand FWC's desire to make sure that when those folks are retaining those specimens for some amount of time, that they want to make sure that they're housed appropriately and that those animals are in a healthy situation. But I do have a concern that it's going to create a rush for exhibition SALs, and that either staff will need to be bolstered for that, because I could see it really increasing the load on staff. And I hope that if that is the direction that FWC is going to go, that they're taking that into consideration. In addition, it sounds like some of the FMC folks that had the ability to hold them short term, there might be some sort of sort of in between scenario, but I'm sure staff has thought about this, and I just want to say, I can see both sides of it, but there is a concern that it's going to not only increase staff's work, but there was a lot of hyperbole and outrage and a lot of numbers that were used for a kind of against FWC and against aquariums for the numbers of animals that were permitted, and it didn't reflect the animals that were actually taken from the wild. And this will, if there's a significant increase in exhibition animal SALs, and the FMSEA folks have to write down any animal that they may want over a 3-year period, you're going to see the numbers go even higher, which is going to allow the folks on the internet to just use, once again, those numbers of what were permitted. And I think that's something that we should take into consideration. Thank you.
Ben, thank you for your comments. Next up is Spencer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Spencer Roberts. I'm a marine ecologist, and I just wanted to express my support for the idea of splitting catch and release on site and housing an animal for any period of time. I think it's very reasonable for FWC to have oversight over that process and just need to know exactly where the animal is going to be going and for how long, etc. In terms of the unknowns about numbers, comments that Mr. Daugherty made, I also, and I know this is not exactly in the proposals, but perhaps there could be some more transparency over the capture numbers, maybe instead of requiring a complicated and expensive public records request to be able to, for the public to be able to know about how many animals are being captured with SAL licenses. Perhaps there could just be a public-facing registry where people could look up those values. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Spencer. It looks like the next person has a business name instead of a name. Would the person with the username We Cope Inc. please identify themselves and provide their comment?
Good evening. Of course I will. I'm sorry about that. My name is Sharonda Hosendorf. I'm the founder of We Cope Inc. And I have a youth and family angler program. And so I'm not typically going out and catching and releasing anything. And we're out here in Northeast Florida. But I do work with a lot of community partners who have aquariums and give a lot of educations to the youth and families that we work with. A lot of them don't have transportation to go out to the beaches and the other tributaries. So this is an opportunity to be able to see, non-invasive, invasive animals, and which I think they work really closely with you all already. But I just would love to continue to see that, we have that oversight and, protecting all the things that needs to be protected with regards to our animal life and ensuring that we're also providing adamant education to those who wouldn't otherwise have that. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Shonda. We appreciate your comments and you being here tonight. Is there anyone else who'd like to give public comment tonight? If so, please raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to speak. Next up is Allison Della-Schmidt.
Hello, Allison Della-Schmidt, Key West and Lower Keys Fishing Guides Association. We go by Lower Keys Guides Association. A couple of comments related to the questions that I asked earlier tonight. The first comment is our guides that are in our association are being utilized more and more frequently within the scientific community for tagging programs of fish. And I only see that growing. And I would love it if there was a way to make it easier on the scientific and academic organizations that we work with to include more guides on the application. I don't think that there's a limit, but I think they usually just specify a few. And because it takes a little bit of time to add additional, and they have to be a little bit agile because it's all depending on which guide is available on which day. I would love it if there was some thoughtful conversation around how to make it where perhaps we as an organization or something of that nature could holistically be included on SALs instead of individuals, or there be a better way for the organizations that we work with to include all of our guides. And then my second comment just goes in support of anything that that you're doing inside of these changes to help the process be like more smooth and efficient when there is a rapid response needed for emergency situations. You're really great to work with us with hours, and I just support anything in these changes to make rapid response easier and more effective for all involved. Thank you.
Allison, thank you for your comments. Next up is Ashley O'Quinn. Ashley, go ahead and unmute yourself and provide your comment. Ashley, either on the top or the bottom of your screen, you should see a microphone icon. And if you press it, it will unmute your microphone and allow you to speak. If you are on, I can hear you now. Great.
Sorry. So my name's Ashley. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I own Beneath Blue Waters. I am a 501c3. Last year, I applied for the ASL and I was shot down. I am an informal educator. I'm not a formal educator, and I know that's what the issue was because I spoke to FWC. So I'm hoping that this year you guys are really taking into consideration informal educators, because people like me, it's a passion project. You know, I spent a lot of money on aquarium equipment and all of that. And I don't believe that it's always the formal educators that are really bringing it to the table. I believe that people with the passion and the ability to do conservation should also have the same opportunity as the formal educators.
Ashley, thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else who'd like to provide comment tonight? I'm not seeing any other hands, so we'll move to wrap it up. And I appreciate everyone who showed up tonight and provided comments and asked questions. This does end our formal comment session. We will continue to gather public feedback on SAL program updates. So if you know someone who'd like to provide additional comments, or there's something you didn't get to say tonight that you think of in the future, there are more opportunities to weigh in. You can email your comments to marine@myfwc.com or submit comments through our web form at myfwc.com/saltwater comments. You can also provide comments at the FWC Commission meeting in February 4th and 5th. There will be a proposed rule hearing on SAL program updates. We'll present a summary of public feedback gathered through this workshop in the December 18th workshop and any of our other public comment channels. And we'll also present to the Commission recommendations for proposed rules. If the Commission approves proposed rules for publication, we'll gather additional public feedback and present recommendations for final rule changes at an additional FWC Commission meeting in the spring of 2026. We appreciate your feedback as it provides important information that staff does consider when developing rule recommendations for the Commission. That concludes this evening's workshop. Thank you again to everyone for taking time to join us, and have a great evening.